I have this. I mean, I'm on tour for this book. I've been wrong so long it feels like right. It's one of my Joe Oliver books, and I'm very happy about it. I've been going around doing readings, but I'm kind of thinking not to do that today. You know, I mean, you can always read it, and you know that's you know, because usually you're reading in places where you're introducing yourself to people. But I wanted to talk not very much about, you know, I was asked to talk about how I became a writer, or what I went through to become a writer, and you know, there's a few things there. But you know, mostly it would be great if, you know, if we talked, if people had questions, and we, you know, and we talked about stuff, which I think is would be better, really. You know, I think it'd be better. So, you know, I did start writing. I was in my mid-30s. I you know, wrote this sentence: on hot, sticky days in southern Louisiana, the fire ants swarmed. I went, that's a good sentence. And then I said, and it must be fiction because I've never been to Louisiana and I've never seen a fire ant, you know. So that's like fiction, right? When you make up things. Everything is fiction, but, you know, some you believe you've seen and some you haven't. And that for me, that's kind of the difference. Much harder to write nonfiction than fiction. It's almost impossible to write nonfiction because it's always not true. And fiction is always true because it's what you're thinking you're saying, you know, which is fine. But, you know, I started writing, and I was I'm lucky that I'm from California. I find Californians to be really interesting. Like, like let's say a woman retires. You know, but nowadays people retire at like 70, right? Maybe, or maybe 75, maybe 80, but whatever. Let's say 70. And a woman retires, and you ask her what she's going to do anywhere in the country, and she'll say, "I'm going to be with my grandchildren. I'm going to, you know, do things with my stupid husband. I'm going to, you know." Like that. But if it's here in California, the woman says, "Well, you know, I'm still very limber, and I think I would like to start a ballet company." And you know, you think she's crazy, right? But then, like 2 years from then, a troupe of 70-plus women, 70-year-old plus women, are performing at the White House. You know, it's a thing. You know, and so the idea is, it's more about the idea, I find, in California than in other places. And so when I started writing, I had there was not even any idea in my head that I was going to start making money or be famous. You know, the younger people are, the more they think that. I'm not really quite sure what impact that is, but I just thought, wow, if I could write a story with a beginning and a middle and an end, that would be so cool, you know. And so I spent, you know, time. I was trying to learn how to write stories, and I was writing them, you know. And I was in a writer's you know, workshop in a guy's private house, but he kicked me out. I'm not really sure why. But then I went to City College in New York, up in Harlem, and it was great. All these wonderful people were there. One of my teachers was Edna O'Brien, and you know, I loved Edna O'Brien. It's not just that she was so beautiful and that she had that great Irish brogue, but she just, you know, she's this outstanding, you know, writer, a writer who actually changed things. You know, when she wrote The Country Girls, all of Ireland was against her, all of Ireland, from one end to another, including her mother. But the rest of the world loved it. And because of that, women writing in Ireland changed. All of a sudden, they could write about their lives rather than pretending, you know, to write the lives that men would like to make sure that they said happened, you know. And that was just, it was extraordinary. Anyway, I wrote a story for Edna, and she read it, and you know, she was beautiful. She was a little imperious, and so she said, "Walter, write a novel," you know, like that. And I went, "Okay." And I went out in 6 weeks. I wrote a novel. You know, it was you know, it was the first book I'd finished nonfiction. It was Easy and Mouse, but you know, it wasn't a mystery. It wasn't a crime novel. I mean, all novels are crime novels, but it wasn't specifically a crime novel. And so I wrote that, and I sent it out to a lot of people. And the answer came back, it was almost universal. You know, that's what you do. You look for universal answers, because that's what you learn from. Though there was nothing for me to learn from this answer. It was, it's really good writing, but it's not commercial. And it took a while to figure out what they meant by not commercial. I mean, I got told a couple of times, white people don't read about black people, black women don't like black men, and black men don't read. So, you know, we're going to publish this book for nobody. And so I went, okay. But I had learned, you know, at City College that, you know, lots of writers write a lot before they get published, you know. Malamud, I mean, the only reason he got published finally was because he wrote a novel about baseball. I said, well, that sounds very American, not very Jewish at all. Good. Let's publish him, you know. And so I wrote another book, but it was Mouse and Easy again, but this time it was in Los Angeles instead of down in Texas, the border between Louisiana and Texas. And I'll write about them, and they'll have a kind of adventure. It wasn't until I was halfway through the book that I realized that it was a crime novel. And I went, oh, okay. Well, I'll kind of mysterize it, you know, and I did that. And I sent it out, and a lot of people were interested because it was, you know, in the genre. And the genre said, well, this is different. This is a black detective. Though the one publisher did say to me, well, you know, there already is a black detective. Garnthony Haywood's, you know, books. He was published before me, and he said, well, there is one now. You know, and I said, but there's a whole lot of white detectives. And he said, I don't know what you mean by that. You know, really. I mean, it was wild. And so, but then, you know, then I got published, you know, and the book, you know, people liked the book, or people didn't like the book. You know, I was so happy. Just to explain, the first book I got was in Publishers Weekly. The book review I got was in Publishers Weekly, and they said it's a hackneyed plot. The characters are predictable. Might as well wait for the movie. That was the review, and I was so happy. I was saying, I got a review in Publishers Weekly. You know, I didn't care they didn't like it. You know, it was, you know, okay. You know, movie? Am I going to have a movie? I mean, what's that? Wow, you know. And then, you know, I'd say, well, is it really? Like, is it predictable? But, you know, I always use my kind of, you know, off-color, you know, thing for that. Somebody says, well, you know, I've seen that before. And I said, well, listen, I've seen a lot of pornography. And they usually do the same things, you know, and nobody seems to mind. I mean, I could write this, you know, books like other people write. It would be okay, you know. And then, you know, and my father, who I love my father very, very much, and he was a really smart guy, and he said, Walter, look, I've read what you're trying to write here, and you know, this is before the novel. It's not going to work. You're not a writer. It's not going to happen. And I went, okay, Dad. So I mean, I didn't care. You know, my father always told me I couldn't do things. And so, but I said to him, I said, well, what do you think? And he says, well, look, prisons are a really growing business. You should get involved in the prison systems. And yeah, he was right. The second largest business in the world is prisons today. You know, yeah, it's wild. I mean, and there's all these private prisons here, and those people who run those private prisons, they take people all over the world. They go to Israel and they take a prisoner to Brazil, and they do all this. There's all this money being spent, and my father was right. But who the hell? I don't want to work in a prison, you know. So I wrote, and I got my book published, and I called my dad and I said, Dad, look, I got my book published, and I said, I can hardly believe it, and my father said, me neither. And then I said, it was Norton, and they gave me a nice advance, you know, in 1990 or 89, whatever it was like $40,000. And I said, they give me this $40,000, and I said, but there's only one holdback. My father said, oh, okay, what's that? And I said, well, they told me that I have to sign a contract for a second book, and they gave me $40,000 for that one. And my father was just like, what? You know? It was a wonderful, you know, kind of experience. Now, you have to understand, my father was an orphan at the age of 8. His mother died when he was 7. His father, you know, went lumbering when he was, you know, that's cutting down trees, not just the way he walked. And he was, you know, he would cut down trees, but he didn't make it back. He probably died. You know, black people went out and did that stuff all the time in the beginning of the 20th century, and he died. And so, well, he died. You know, we don't know where his body is. It's under that tree, something. You know, and he went to Texas. He left Louisiana. He went to Texas. You know, jumped the train. Who knows what happened there? And then he got to Texas and found his maternal grandfather. And the guy said, well, okay, Lee, you could sleep on the porch, but, you know, I ain't gonna feed you. You know, and that was my father's life, you know. And he read books. He used to steal books. He told me, he knew he had to tell me he stole the books, because he always told me he never had money. But he said, I would steal it. He said, then I would bring it back, which was the lie, right? Because he never brought those books back. But he'd read, you know, cowboy stories and things like that. Leaders live in Texas. All Texans think they're cowboys. Doesn't matter what color they are. And he wrote a story, and he sent it in a lot of publishers in Chicago. That sent the story to one of the magazines in Chicago. Months and months went by, didn't hear anything, and you know, and he felt, well, they must not have liked it, you know. But it ended up that he stole another book, and his story was in there, but just with somebody else's name on it. And I think that was part of the heartbreak for my dad, you know. And I think that, you know, he learned. He said, well, black boys ain't gonna get books published. You know, he was a wonderful writer, but you know, he couldn't know it for some reason. So that was that. And then, you know, listen, that's the beginning. Then, you know, I made some movies, and then I wrote more books, and I keep writing books. And I have to say that when people ask me that, first, when people ask me, what do you do? I do a lot of television work nowadays and some movie work. But I never say that. I always say, well, I'm a novelist, because that's what I do. I write novels. And when they ask me, what is the best part of writing novels? I said, writing novels. The best part of my day is when I'm writing. I like it when people buy the books, when people read the books, when people tell me they like the books. All that stuff is great, you know. People, you know, want to make a movie, or they want to work with me, or I love it when people, you know, because people, like, you know, they hire me a lot in Hollywood just so they'll have my name on something. It's because, you know, and that's really great, you know, it's wonderful. But it's not in any way deeply satisfying. It's just, you know, because, you know, who knows, you know, why people like you or don't like you, or, you know, a lot of people, they don't even read your books. They just say, I liked it, you know. I mean, it's true, you know. It's not in this room, of course, but it's a different room. Anyway, so I mean, that's it. I mean, there are other things, probably people ask me questions, and I will answer them and talk about that. But I want to say one of the things about Edna, she wrote about real Irish girls living real Irish girl lives, which were ecstatic and terrible, which were sexual and betraying, and it's a really interesting thing, you know, because very often, like I got, you know, the Grandmaster Award, you know, from the Mystery Writers of America, who haven't always been the best people. But they're very nice nowadays, you know. But they haven't always been the best. I once quit because, you know, because I once called them. I said, listen, you have never given any of these awards to people of color. What's wrong with you? And they said, if you don't like it, you can quit. That's what they said. So I did, you know. But then some time went by, and finally, you know, I was given the Grandmaster Award, which was great. And I wanted to make sure when I gave the talk that I said the right things. Like if they actually did give it to Chester Himes, or they actually did give it to somebody else who deserved it, certainly. I should know that. But I went all the way through, and what happened was you'd say, this guy won, this guy won, this guy won, this woman won. This guy won, this guy won, that guy won, this woman won. And then all of a sudden, it was this guy won, this woman won, this guy won, this woman won. And I went, what happened that year? And that was the year that Sisters in Crime, came to their full strength. And it was, it was a great thing. It was a great difference and everything had to change. Just like all of Ireland had to change for Edna. The whole mystery thing, which was really a guy thing, cigars and poker games, man. That was it, That's what you did at Bowser Khan, But then all of a sudden it was something else. And I thought it was really, really, wonderful. And I thought, getting the award was great. And now a lot of people, they recognize. I started this organization, with Kelly Garrett, called Crime Writers of Color. It started off, there's like 20 of us, and that's the way it was when I first started writing. It was about 10 or 12 people, when we did stuff together, it was great. But now there's like 400, because it's people of color, it's international. There's people in Brazil, and there's people in Japan, and there's people all over the place, in India, even Nepal. I mean, it's like really very, very cool, and that's been a wonderful thing, that opening up, because the mystery genre is about the lives we live. And the crime stories are, there's crime, I know it is. People get killed or whatever. But the thing is that you're talking about a time and a place and a part of a culture. If you want to write about ICE and what's going on right now today, and you just write about that, mostly the people who are interested will read it. But if you write a thing about like a guy who owns one of these strawberry plantations up north in California, he gets killed, and they arrest one of the Chicano strawberry pickers for it, and then they hire a Mexican detective from down in LA to come up and try to find out what happened. Everybody's going to read it. Because the interest in figuring out what's going on in our world. There is the solving of a crime, but I think a lot of people read in the genre to figure out what's going on, or to hopefully believe. I'd be like that. I'd be like one of Lee Child's characters. There's that. But I like Lee. He's a nice guy, and I like those stories. But I think the most interesting thing is when you're telling stories that allow people in to understand what world they're living in. So that's kind of a brief snippet of my career as a writer. Any thoughts, ideas, questions, minor criticisms? Yes.
When you start out to write a book, how do you know whether or not you're going to use a particular character all the way through? In other words, if you start out in chapter 1 using a particular character, do you carry that character all the way through to chapter whatever? Do you sometimes find the need not to?
I haven't yet found the need to it is funny, when you read a book or watch a movie and you think this is the main character, but on page 30 they die. And you go, wow, what's going to happen now? And this person that you hardly knew, was always walking out the door, that it becomes the main character or some main characters. I haven't done that yet. It's possible though, because often I just start writing a book without, knowing where I'm going.
Yeah.
Well, but that's a question for you to answer. Either your story works or it doesn't.
Right.
There's a lot of novels where the character stays in all the way to the end, and the story doesn't work.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you've kind of gone over this a little bit already in talking about your background, but a problem that many, many writers have at any level that they're working at is those moments of self-doubt when you look at what you're writing and say, oh no, this is terrible. I'm no good. Why do I do this? Why do I bother? How do you personally deal with that?
Well, that's kind of like dating, right? I mean, really, you're out there and you say, oh my God, I farted at the table. That's it. It's over now. I really don't. I guess I really don't understand sex, or whatever it is that you. But you just keep. You keep trying. Maybe it doesn't work. And maybe it does. I mean, it's not. To question yourself, I think people do that all the time. It's not a bad thing to do. It's not a bad thing to, if somebody who doesn't question themselves is going to write a really bad book, you know that, because they don't know how to edit. The main thing that you have to know is how to edit yourself. And you edit things because you question whether this is good, whether this is bad, whether this is working. It's good. It's pretty much a solitary way of life. But you have an editor. The editor might say something that you agree with. It's very rare that happens with me, but every once in a while it does. And I go, wow, I got to rewrite this whole book because of what they just said. And that's, that. But what I'm saying, self-doubt is not a problem. Not writing is a problem.
Where did Easy Rawlins come from?
Well, I mean, there's probably a lot of different answers to that question. Some which I don't know. But here's the thing. I was writing a story called Open House. The open house parties. Everybody gives you like a quarter or a nickel or whatever they can, and they come in and they have a party in your house, and at the end you have enough for the rent. So it's in Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas, 1930s. A guy is having this open house party, and he's talking, but he doesn't really identify himself. He just talks to people. So and so comes in, this person comes in. They put their guns, on the table, and then they go in, and again and again. Finally, this woman, beautiful woman that he just loves in every way, named Etta Mae Harris, walks in, and she walks in, and she looks at Easy, and she goes, "Hey, Easy," and he's going, "Hi, Etta, how you doing?" And then right behind her comes, dressed even better than she is, Mouse. And Mouse walks in, he looks at Easy, and he says, "Hey, Easy, how you doing?" That's where I got his name from. I mean, because she just said hi, but Mouse said, "Hey, Easy, how you doing?" So then I knew who Easy was. Now then there's this long arc of writing. I still discover things about Easy in novels. I'm still discovering his history. Fearless Jones is the same thing. Jackson Blue is the same thing. The Mouse has a new girlfriend. She's Viet Cong. She was killing Westerners in Saigon. And then she decided she was going to quit, so she came to America. There's a big old scar down one side of her face. I don't know nearly enough about her. It'll be 4 or 5 books before I really get her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do they talk to you, or do they? I mean, do you feel like they're real people?
That's such a hard question to answer. No, they don't talk to me. That's the first thing. Secondly, when I'm writing about them, I'm creating a world. And real life and fictional life are very, very different. Real life takes a whole life to live, and it's mostly boring. But in fiction, these characters are doing things that they might be impossible, they might not be, but it's not like they're real. It's not like I ever worry about. My friend Paul Coates, who published one of my books from Black Classic Press, he published Gone Fishing. His son is Ta-Nehisi Coates. I wrote a book recently called Galen, a romance in black, because I like genre, so I read a black romance, and Paul, I gave the book to Paul. He reads all my books, but weeks went by, and he hadn't finished it, and I called him one day and I said, "So Paul, I guess you don't like that book too much, huh?" And he said, "Well, Walter, I've been reading it, and every day I'm a little slower and a little slower and a little slower. Finally, one day I stopped." And I said, "Well, okay, that's fine. You don't have to like it." He said, "Oh no, Walter, I love it." He said, "But I'm very worried about that main character. I'm really worried about what's going to happen with him. And I don't want to get there." Wow. So Paul likes it, and a lot of people do, but I don't think of it like that. I think of it more as a song, and and it's like that. The song is real, but it's more real for other people than it is the writer, I think.
Walter, I'm curious, how about when you're reading the paper, how much of what's going on around you you find showing up in your characters that starts to generate interest for you in your mind?
I can answer that question in two ways. Number one, I find that the media in America, it's getting a little better, but media in America never really covers black life. You know, listen, 30 years ago, I'd say, well, you know, the police, they kill you and then they put a gun on you. And, you know, and people say to me, that's not what happens with the police. They're not like that. I had an editor once, Jerry Howard, who I said that the police in Harlem, not in Harlem, in Watts were corrupt. And Jerry said, listen, I come from a family of cops. There are no corrupt cops. But then the next weekend, they busted like 40 cops in Harlem for dealing heroin. And I just sent him to him and said, so Jerry, just let me tell you about you and your dad. Is there any Howards in here? And he didn't talk to me. But it's that. The other thing is, though, is I think that it's not just a black thing. I think, most Americans, I mean, really, I don't know, many people in here are old enough to remember watching Walter Cronkite get on the news and say, I've been lying to you all this time about Vietnam. It's just not true, what I said. And it's like, what? You've been lying? What? You're Walter Cronkite. You're my uncle. But there's always a lie. I mean, really, I was talking to a woman yesterday. We were arguing, because she doesn't like Trump. A lot of people don't like Trump, but she was saying that he's the worst, he's the this. And I said, look, Lyndon Baines Johnson lied about Vietnam and killed millions of people. And you're not saying anything about him. But imagine all those people who died there and in Cambodia. Imagine Pol Pot, who died of old age, right? I mean, it's just like, there's the news and there's something else. The news tells you about an event and it's fine, but it's not necessarily. It happened, but it didn't happen for the reasons that they're saying.
In your early Easy Rawlins books, they take place in the 60s, 50s, maybe late 40s. How much research goes into what the police were like, what the streets looked like that you describe in detail?
I hate research. If I had to research books, I wouldn't be a writer. I'd be like, I read Michener sometime and I go, oh my God, this is exactly what I don't want to be, to explain. And again, I think research is very, very difficult. What I do is I write a book, and then I go back and I look at all the things I said, and I said, is this true? And if it doesn't matter, I leave it alone. But if it does matter, then I look it up, I think about it and stuff like that. But to understand, like who would I research to understand what the police were like in Los Angeles? Because there was a big part of Los Angeles just loved their police. They're really good. And there are other people who feel that the police would kill them if they could get away with it. I got stopped, and I also got in trouble with a writer's room I was in for telling this story. I was walking down 18th Street toward Robertson Avenue one day in the 60s, late 60s, and a policeman stopped me. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm walking to my friend's house. And he said, what kind of friend? Where are you going? What are you doing? I said, well, look. And he said, okay, put your hands up. And he certainly went through all my pockets, and he asked me what I was doing again. And then he went through my pockets again, and maybe I missed the gun in there, And then he finally said, okay, you can go. And I was high, really. I was really high. But it was okay high. And the policeman, I said, excuse me, sir. Because I was, I know how to talk to him anyway. I said, excuse me, sir. Why did you stop me? I wasn't doing anything. I was just walking down the street. And he said, look, when I see a Patty in a black neighborhood, I stop him. And when I see in a Patty neighborhood, I stop him because they're usually up to no good. There were no white people I knew who ever heard that. None. I mean, maybe Mickey Cohen, but you had to be deep into crime in order for that to happen. I didn't have to be, though.
I understand that the best part about writing is writing, and that you only get something written by sitting on your butt and writing, and that's the best part of the day. Talk to me a little bit about that second
About the editing process?
of writing. Yeah, because it's writing too.
It's a funny
It's
thing.
different.
It's a funny thing. I mean, I'm going to say something about that, but it comes from another place. It's like when you go to somebody and they said, "Wow, yeah, I read War and Peace," and I go, "Wow, really? How many times?" And they go, "Once." And I go, "Well, then you didn't really read War and Peace, because you can't just, you think he just wrote it out like that, like word after word, like the way you read it? I mean, what? I usually, it depends, but an average of 20 times passing through a novel is what it feels like, and that's reading all the way through, seeing what's wrong, and then fixing it, and then reading it all the way through and seeing what's wrong and then fixing it. And you do that again and again and again. And then when you finally read it the 20th time, you get all the way to the end, and you see what's wrong, and you realize you don't know how to fix it. Well, that's when it's ready to be published, right? You say, I did everything that I can do, and maybe people know it's not. But the other thing is, I just want to say, one of the things that I do, because one of the problems when you read a book that after you've read something that you've written, you read it 10, 15, 20 times, you aren't reading it anymore. You're seeing something that you believe you know, but it's not there. It's something else. And so I have always read books out loud and recorded them at some point during the process. So, and you get a lot just in the reading out loud, and certainly when you listen to it again, you get that. Yeah.
So I was wondering, do you dream? Do dreams affect your writing? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and have to write it down, or?
I'm going to answer that question from another thing. Psychoanalysis. Freud starts psychoanalysis because people are coming home from the war, and they have these, hysterical symptoms. Hysterical, which used to mean women's disease, but not anymore. So he knows that men have hysterical, symptoms also. And he used it. What they did was, you lie down every day, and a guy sits next to you. You freely, express, things. You relate to things, and you're going, oh yeah, red. Okay, yeah, apple. That kind of thing. But after the hour, you go back home. Your unconscious back there is thinking and thinking. And the next day when you lie down, there's new things, And that, for me, is the most important moment. I have to write every day. I know people tell me they write 8 hours a day. I think they're crazy. I write 3 hours at most, maybe 1,000 words a day. But I realize that every day, every time I've worked on it, something new comes up in my unconscious. So now, did I dream about it? I don't think so. Sometimes, yes, but new thoughts come up. They kind of freely associate, and they make a deeper and deeper thing. I write every day. Period. Every day. People come to me and say, "Well, I don't have to write on vacation, do I? I don't have to write on the weekends." I said, "Well, if you're dying, you don't have to write. But other than that." I mean, you should be writing every day, because the more days you don't write, the further away you get from that unconscious thing that you're not even completely connected to. So that's related to dreams in a way, and I think more important for me. I never write down dreams. I remember them, but.
So how do you keep the editor in your head from stopping you when you're actually writing the 1,000 words a day?
Yeah, well, it is the most important question for any writer. And I think that in what I was just saying is that I'm just freely associated. I'm just writing. And it's wrong, The next day when I read that 1,000 words again, I'm fixing it all over the place, And then I write, go on. And that's, I think it's the process of writing that is the answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In what way do your parents, consciously or unconsciously, their essence or heritage come up in your writing or not?
Come on, no, let keep that, because I need to, give me a little more for that question.
When you think back at your books and
Yeah.
your characters,
Yeah.
can you think of times in which either heritage inspiration has come up?
When you say heritage, what do you mean exactly?
Could be background from your mom's side, background from your dad's side, or just like you'll look at a character and you're like, oh, like that essence reminds me of my dad or reminds me of my mom.
I don't think I do that. It's not the writer's job, I think, to know what you're writing. It's the writer's job to make it work, right? So people will look at it and they'll go, not to sound, pompous or anything, but, the Aristotelian, the dialectic. When people are talking, you want to make it sure that they sound like real people talking and not like somebody writing about people talking. And also that whatever conversation they're having or whatever physical thing that's going on between them, that it works out to something else. And you discover that, Now, when I go back, and I don't ever think about my parents or relatives or old lovers or people I would like to kill. None of that. None of those things, like come up in it, because those things are not important. What important is the structure, the ideational structure, I think. All right. I'm sorry, that may not be a good answer, but.
Oh, it's a great answer. Thanks.
Okay.
Do you ever work on more than one project at a time, and do they get convoluted in your head because you're editing one while you're starting something new?
I write every day. And that's not an exaggeration. I write every day. So, okay, let's say I'm writing a Joe Oliver novel. So I'm writing and it's really a lot of fun, and I'm writing, and I get to the end, and I send it to my editor, getting ready to fight, saying, no, I ain't doing that. But that's on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I'm still writing. But I'm not writing on that book anymore. So I start a new book. So I'm writing a new book, or whatever. It could be an article, could be something. I'm writing that, and I'm going on and on and on and on. And in the middle of that, I get back the book that the guy was editing. So okay, now I got to go look at his notes and do that. And so then I finish that. I send that in. I finish this book. I send that in. So that's a third book I'll start. So it's never more than 3, but 3 happens. I try to write on the same book every day. But sometimes, because of the business of writing, you interfere with yourself. But it doesn't ever bother me. And I think it doesn't ever bother me because I'm writing every day. I think if I broke off and I had to go on something and then I broke off and then come back to something, I think that would bother me a lot.
I was curious, you had mentioned that you're doing a lot more work in TV and film these days.
Yeah.
And I wondered, what is the difference in terms of the craft of writing in those other fields, especially as they're more collaborative or other people putting their fingers in the pies, so to speak?
It gets terrible, it's like you write a script, like especially in television, and they put it, they do it, and then you look at it and you don't even recognize it. You say, did I write that? I don't remember that. Because so many people, there's the editor, there's the director, there's the actors, there's the people who do the clothes, there's all this stuff, there's the location people, there's 1,000 things that can make it different. And I don't worry so much about, I just, you just try, it's like the blueprint is enough in film. You give them a blueprint, and from that blueprint they make the film. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole thing, and there's nothing, But if what I'd rather do, it depends. If today I need money, I'd rather be in television or movies, and if today I want to be happy, I'd rather be writing, a novel or a short story.
Yeah, that's true.
What's your favorite adaptation of your work?
I like all of them, because one of the things is about doing things. If you enter film wanting to make the maximum amount of money or more, then you have to do lowest common denominator kind of working, you know. So anything that you really feel, you probably don't want to put in there because they're going to hate it. You know, you can say, no, you can't do that. You can't have those two men kissing each other. This is a children's movie, you know. So, men kiss each other, you know, fathers kiss sons. What? No, you can't have it. What do they call it? It's optics, bad optics, they say, you know. And you go, really? Bad optics? But this is real. So, we don't want real. We want money.
Who are your favorite writers, and what do you look for in a good editor?
It really ends up my favorite books, not my favorite writers. Like, I love the writing of Roger Zelazny. He's a fantasy/science fiction writer. He's one of the best writers word for word I've ever read. I love Chester Himes. I love 100 Years of Solitude. I love, you know, there are books that I love. I love Dead Souls by Gogol more than you can say. I wouldn't say that I like Gogol. It's just I like that. Of course, he wrote The Nose and The Overcoat and The Inspector General. He did a lot of great books. But, you know, there are a lot of things that I like. But the thing about editors, I had an editor once, and I was writing, it was Joe Oliver, and Joe Oliver was in jail because he'd been arrested for sexual assault, for rape. And they had him in Rikers Island. You know, you can't be a policeman in Rikers Island. That's bad stuff. And his dispatch sergeant came in to visit him, trying to help him, you know. And he said, you know, they got you for rape. He said, man, I did not rape anybody. He said, but you know, when you're in that house, she said, you raped, but I didn't. It was consensual. He said, but they have video. I said, it's still, you know, consensual. And he said, yeah, man, but your dick is so big and so black that it looked like you were trying to kill it. And my editor, this is the editor you don't want, by the way. This is my editor wrote in the side, he said, never use the word dick. And I said to him back, I wrote back under the note, I said, what are you, an editor or a censor? I'm not quite sure. Editors read your book in order that they know it and they love it and they want what you intended to write to work. And that kind of editor will say, look, you're saying that this guy is wearing a black suit, but everything else you said about him is he's very you know, blue collar, working class. You know, he never dresses like that. He never does that kind of thing. And the editor will be right. If it's a good editor, they will know when you're not doing what you want to be doing. It's not when you're not doing what they want you to be doing. When you're not doing what you want to be doing. That's why they bought the book. Because they like your voice, they like your story, they want it to work. And so that's what you look for in an editor. Now, you might not get that good editor, you know, you might not. But, you know, and sometimes you just have to give up and, you know, just fight with the editors once they start telling you what they want. But that makes enough sense, right? Okay. People often ask me about writer's block. And for the longest time, I could never answer any questions about writer's block. Because people say writer's block as if it were one thing. It's 1,000 things. It might be that you're afraid that your children are going to find out how salacious you are. It might be that, you know, you committed a crime at some point or another and you don't want people to know about it. It might be that you don't want your mom to hear you say what you believe. Like Edna writing about the country girls, or you know, or it could be some incredibly deep trauma or psychosis. Most things, like I tell people, oh, you can't write that story? Write another story. Don't worry about it. Just go to the next story. A lot of people that works for. But if there's a lot of like a lot of trauma in you from your experience in life, you might not be able to write. You might need, you know, a therapist 5 days a week. You might need drugs. You know, it really depends on, you know, each one of us is unique with the problems that we run across in writing, and you know, it's It's tough.
Walter, I want to thank you so much. I have a little gift for you here. Just a moment.